Call the meeting in order at 6:31. Roll call, please.
Tinsley,
Present.
Anderson, Douglas,
Here.
Rector, Rosales,
Here.
Harper.
Here.
I move for approval. Second.
Next, approval of minutes.
I move for approval of facilities meeting of May 8th, 2018. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 8th. Any discussion on that, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Public participation? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to communications from the board, our committee.
I'd like to welcome Tracy Douglas to her first official county board meeting, committee meeting, that is.
Item 7, items to be approved by the facilities. A, discussion of old nursing home utility isolation, closure, and boarding. GHR utility installation presentation, question and answers of utility shut off to old nursing home.
This is Jim Gleason with GHR, an engineer with the firm that we're using.
Microphone.
This is Jim Gleason with GHR. Jim represents engineering firm here locally who we've been working with to perform a study of Elias. If you remember, we've got about 60,000, approximately 60,000 square feet of the old nursing home building and poorhouse that have significant mold issues to the levels that it's not usable nor safe to be in for any length of period of time over a 2-hour period at this point in time. Why is there mold? Well, because the roof has never been replaced when it should have many years ago. It's leaking badly, and it is what it is. The Elias, Illinois Law Enforcement Alarm Systems rented the entire space up until about a year and a half ago. Not a tremendous amount of dollars per square foot, but some income, about $2.50. They use that area as a training area for their officers and firemen that they perform training services throughout the year. It's been a little bit of a burden and a loss for Elias, our renter, but they have taken over. They're using other space within the building to accommodate that loss of training space. So, since it's no longer being utilized and it is space that cannot be occupied, we are looking at ways with Jim's assistance. What would it take to shut off utilities, isolate the utilities so that we're not heating that space, having lights on, all of those things that you can imagine are within that building, including our IT communications needed to be looked at. So I'll let Jim kind of explain how he's done it, what he's done, and what he's come up with, and then we can have some further discussion.
Okay, so our charge was to identify what needed to be done to cut off the building in preparation for demolition. Most of these things are fairly easy in terms of power and water and so on. And we've identified what needs to be done and roughly what it costs. There are some issues. The fire alarm system that serves Elias currently serves the building that's fixing to be torn down here. So we're just going to turn that off and kind of leave the existing, what I call the 1904 building, which is the old nursing home complex. As we looked at the, what it's called the communications complex, there's several fiber optic services that run into and through the older building and then pass through the 1972 building, which is occupied by ILEAS, and continue on to do other things. So we've met with the various people that are associated with those, identified ways to reroute these fiber optic services so that they can continue in operation and attach dollar costs to those. So what you see is a whole, and I assume you have the report, there's a whole collection of line items leading up to one total as far as how do we draw a line around the building, cut everything off, refeed what needs to be refeed, and then leave the building in preparation for demolition.
Yes. The section that's going to be demolished, did we ever do any work? Because I remember there was some masonry work that was done and some roofing that was done, but I'm not quite sure if it was on the other part that we're going to salvage and keep, or was it on this part that is going to be demolished?
Okay, I can't really respond to masonry work. We're mechanical electrical engineers, so I wouldn't have been part of that. I guess Dana can probably respond to
I
that.
can help you out a little bit. When Elias came on board, county was looking for renters for the space, and I was not here at the time, but in the early 2000s. They came in and rented space, so they hired a local architect, IGW, out of Urbana, that put together and designed a project. They re-roofed the newer portion of the building. So if you're familiar enough with the building, basically it's from the portico, the main entrance, to the east, those wings, A, B, and C, that were re-roofed. They tuck pointed those buildings. They did not touch anything from the portico going to the west and south. That structure is just in deplorable condition. We've got, as I said earlier, roofs that leak, but roofs are pulling away from building edges. Staircases that are external are pulling away from the masonry that are attached to the walls. So we've got tremendous water influx into the building. And nothing was done with the old structure, but purposefully. So we're at that point in time where we've got to shut it down and keep people out, board it up. We don't have dollars budgeted right now for closure for tear down, but we've got some dollars we can throw at it so we can start the process. We can also save some dollars for utility costs by doing some of these projects now instead of continuing to pay utilities, electricity, water, sewer, et cetera, for these facilities. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Mr. Gleason, to me, all these costs seem high. Since we're talking about demolishing a building, I mean, the simple thing is you cut off the service and you demolish the building. So why it would cost $31,000 to turn off the natural gas, I'm assuming it's because it's running through something and we got to go back around?
It's a good question, and we were talking about it this afternoon. There's one gas meter that's down by the old boiler building that serves the old boiler building and ILEAS. Okay, it's a two PSI system, so that line runs underground from the boiler building, clear around, let's say, on the south side of the complex, and then into the basement of ILEAS where it feeds their boilers. So we've got to do something with that. My thought was we'll cut that off completely, and then we'll have Ameren bring us a new service from, I think that's Bartell Drive there, to the east, up to the building, and then repipe inside accordingly.
And we're still sticking with the $31,000 under that arrangement, or would that be less?
You know, at this point, these are budget numbers.
Yeah. One last question then, in this regard, or in the same category of questioning. The fiber work, this totals up to $92,000. It just seems, I'm not implying anything, it just seems like a lot, because.
It does. It does. There's
I mean,
three separate, actually, there's
If
four
it were,
separate services.
if that building were looked at all by itself and nothing existing, you simply cut it off where it's at and brought in a new feed, that would cost you, I can't imagine that costing $92,000. So what are we doing that's costing so much?
Well,
Why are
the-
we choosing to do it that way? What's causing us to?
Okay, the issue is that fiber cables run from, for instance, the county-owned fiber, and we spent a lot of time with that gentleman right there, figuring out where this stuff starts, where it goes, and where it ends. So we have to, let me just go through the architecture a bit. There's a fiber line that comes from highway, underground, into the west end of the old nursing home, 1904, runs exposed through there, gets into the interconnecting link to the 72, hits a junction box, and then continues on to 1905, which is the MECAD building. Okay, that's part of a loop. So the idea is to reestablish that loop by putting in from the highway to this building, the 1972 building, and then back out and over to MEDCAD. So there's some significant cost considerations associated with that. And I've got the the estimates are appended to the back of that, so you can see where our guesstimate is to where the money's going. In terms of the actual costs of this stuff, I think self-performing some of this would probably be advantageous from a cost standpoint. The part most people can't do is boring in underground conduits. Then there's two more services that come into ILEAS. There's this Illinois Century Network line and an ITV3 line, both of which have to be rerouted while they continue in operation. So it's another, kind of juggling these balls. I also have some money for some new switches built into that estimate to replace the ones that are in there. Yes?
It might be an irrelevant question, but is there an opportunity to salvage some of that copper and sell that at a minimal cost? I believe that the sprinkler system will be copper.
The sprinkler system is more than likely black steel.
Black steel. Okay.
From that era. It's more than likely rusty black steel, actually.
Okay.
I apologize. I was chuckling when he mentioned the copper because of the old Chanute Air Force Base. We just had another incident of people going into the old buildings and taking out the copper. It's just, so it made me chuckle when he said it. That we could probably get some of those people to come down here for a week.
Very inexpensively, they could dismantle it. Okay, thank you.
Tracy?
This may be a dumb question, but I noticed, at least with the sprinkler system, and I think one other thing said that it left it vulnerable to a fire. So would the plan be to not unhook those until it's closer to demolishment, or go ahead and do it, risk a fire?
There's a number of things that put the building at risk that are involved here. Okay, and let's just put them on the table. When you cut the heat off of a building, it accelerates the deterioration of that building. I mean, they go fast when you turn the heat off in our environment. So all the problems that are in there now will accelerate when you turn the heat off. When you turn the sprinkler off, which of course, if you turn the heat off, you better turn the turn the sprinkler off because it's filled with water and it will freeze and it will break and cause even worse problems. It leaves you vulnerable to fire. I mean, there's no two ways around it. So my concern would be that not too much time should elapse between cutting the building utilities off and leaving it defenseless and that day when you finally push it over and haul it away. The fire alarm's the same way, by the way. When you turn the fire alarm, how will you know that there's anything going on in there until somebody sees, what's happening?
A couple of points that I'd throw out. One is that there's two standpipes that furnish the fire retardation system, the sprinkler system. So we could cut the one off in the old building, and the newer building still is sprinkled. and will meet code. We would, or at least I would propose, we leave the fire alarm intact till the building is taken down so that you have an accurate information that should you have a fire, you'll know where it's at. So, but Jim is right, it is vulnerable. There's also some thought about, and some good reasons for it, that it wouldn't be a bad idea to disconnect the old building from the existing building by some matter of distance to help protect should there ever be a fire. So that's something we can take a look at. And it really depends upon, how long is this building going to be vacant and utilities turned off potentially versus being taken down. So that's something we'll have to look at as well.
If I could add just one thing to that. One of the things that we have in the general work here is to build a wall at the interconnecting link basement level, because the floor of the old 1904 building is up here and the floor of the 1972 building is down here. This building floods. And when we turn the power off, the pumps are going to quit pumping. So we've got to stop that water back there and just protect the 72. I'm sorry, go ahead.
John, you got a question?
Yeah, I apologize, going back to the internet. Could you explain again ITV3's role in the ICN? You said they have a loop that's there. Is that theirs?
This is ILEAS infrastructure, okay? So this is not the county-owned, it took me a while to figure this out, by the way. The county-owned infrastructure is owned by the county, and this is the one that starts at Highway and goes through the nursing home and then on to MedCat. This ICN and ITV3 is stuff that ILEAS uses.
So it's their redundancy. It's another fiber feed in for them
The
for redundancy.
ICN is a redundancy to the ITV3.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Geraldo?
One additional question. The total amount, which is about $350,000, is that the threshold to be able to put bids out there, or since it's higher than 250? I know that there was a threshold that if it was above 250, we would have to do an RFP, request for proposal, to do this type of work. So what my question is, since we are spending almost 350, could we put a bid out there to find out how much would it cost cheaper? Since it's just capping a lot of the stuff that we have there, it's going to stay in. It's not like we're going to go ahead and rip it out. We're going to demolish the building.
There's some work that can be done internally, as Jim was saying, to save dollars. There's some work that would need to be done with contractors. I mean, that could be bid out. We do not have $350,000 budgeted. We have some dollars that we could spend this year, this fiscal year. So if we took, for instance, if we looked at the fiber work, which is probably the most important thing, particularly with IT in the room, look at that, look at domestic water and general utilities, electric, taking that, we probably could fit that within our budget means for this fiscal year. And then look at doing more the following year, but also keep in mind that we need to take this building down at some point soon. So hopefully that.
So what direction are you looking from the committee to this item? Because this is an action item, correct?
Yeah, it got placed on the action item. I guess I'm looking for some direction from the committee, approval to at least take parts and pieces that fit within the fiscal year budget to be able to start to take utilities down and move so that when we are ready to take the building down, we have less upfront time.
Do we have any money budgeted for this?
That's what I was going to ask.
in this year's budget?
We have some dollars remaining in our capital
Okay,
asset fund to be able to do this, is what I've budgeted
okay.
for these items.
So I guess you could get direction towards, do we have to make a motion, vote on that, or is that money available to spend?
I think if you just, if the committee would just give me some general direction, I'll report back what we can do this fiscal year. But we've got
Okay.
about 150,000 available in capital asset to be able to start, some of these projects.
I assume you couldn't do it all before the end of the year, so I guess direction to start trying to get some of it done this fiscal year and calendar year too.
Thank you. And my main focus is down the line, the county realizes it needs to do a lot of IT work, things of that nature. So as you have priced this out and the work that will be done there, has that been looked at in the macro sense of the plan for the work throughout the county? 90,000 is something to consider, so I'd hate to see that money spent, and then as the county moves along in the next couple of years, then have to spend duplication of money, okay?
So the first point I'd make is that not all of this fiber money is related to the county-owned fiber. Okay, so some of that is ILEAS related, and there's actually some AT&T fiber that needs to be done. In terms of trying to anticipate the future, we've had discussions with the county IT folks about what type of fiber should be installed in there. I think there's a thought that we'd upgrade the speed of the fiber optic loop, if you will, by changing the type of fiber cable that's installed. So what we've envisioned in our head is any new stuff that we put in terms of the county fiber would have those specifications, which is probably faster and better cable, better quote unquote, than the rest of the county fiber. You see what I'm saying? If we got this chain, we're going to replace all the links. Let's not put a link in that we know is obsolete to begin with. So that was kind of the thought process.
Okay, so those conversations have happened.
Yes.
As part of that conversation is the discussion that's going to stay separated with ILEAS, or is it eventually all going to fold together? The fiber optics in the system and who owns it?
We have viewed them as independent as they are now.
Okay.
Geraldo?
My last question is that we're getting ready to do budget assessment, I believe, in several weeks from now, and projections for next year. And my question is really one that you have enough funds this year to complete this job? Is that what you're indicating? Or this will be done in phases?
It'll be done in phases. I've got about 150,000 in capital asset.
So as
To
far
put it this, so that it would be a phased work. I've not done anything for next year that's not slated. However, in the 10 or 11-year plan that was produced, there was dollars to take the building down. I don't remember which year that was, but it's certainly in there.
But if we move forward to approve this, would that commit the other 200,000 into next year's budget, or that'll be part of your budget presentation coming up in 3 weeks?
Yes, that would not obligate any additional funds being spent as laid out within the GHR report. It'll just take care of whatever we can take care of right now, to hopefully save us some dollars, some utility dollars.
Yeah, because I know during those times, we get into the budget crunch, and we're trying to penny pinch here and penny pinch there. And, we're looking at the building maintenance plan that we put together several years ago, and this would fall in congruent with what was projected within the scale of work that needs to be done. on the most urgent amount of buildings that we need and some that need major repairs versus those that need to be demolished? Is this part of that plan?
This portion of the building is not included in that. This portion was slated for demo a number of years ago, based upon county's inaction to adequately update roofing and building envelope. I mean, this has been set in motion by inaction 12, 15 years ago.
All of our buildings, yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
If we were to go ahead and shut off everything in that building, would it be able to, I guess, maintain itself through the phases of being demolished? And if not, would that push forward the phases and in turn maybe alter the budget for it?
It's a good question. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? The status of the building is changing on a year-by-year basis. That portion of the building has significant lead and asbestos within the structure. To take the building down, one school of thought is to do the abatement process. Another school of thought says, don't worry about it, just pay a heavier price for tear-down material to be taken to a location, a dump area that allows for asbestos and lead. It just costs more to take away. Jim did mention, and he's absolutely correct, once you turn the heat off, the building is going to get worse in terms of the leaking. More damage will be done. So it's going to fall apart a lot faster. It'll be accentuated, certainly. Building's not safe to be into right now, frankly. We need to board up first floor windows and doors, keep people out. We've already got doors that are locked and padlocked, but that still doesn't mean somebody can't break a window to get in and get in and get hurt, do something stupid, be exposed to the mold issue that's there, particularly if they have a mold allergy. It would be extremely detrimental to their health if they did have that. So hopefully that helps answer some of your question, but it's a good question. It's a tough one.
I got a couple questions here. In your 10-year plan you're presenting to the budget this year, what year did you have the demolition in that? Do you remember? I don't have it all. I knew I should have looked that up. But,
Yeah. I too, obviously. No, I don't remember. I apologize. But I'll have it
Okay.
ready next meeting.
In my opinion, we have a building that's condemned. I mean, we were running air quality control checks, even let ILEAS use it. The roofs are about to collapse. We have to move forward with something here, and if you can get started with $150,000, maybe he and Mr. Gleason can start phasing this in. Because just as Dana just said, somebody gets in one of those buildings or something falls down or a wall falls, that puts the county at a tremendous liability, in my opinion. As it's been stated, facilities have been neglected for years. Yeah, I hate to say that, but it's time to start doing something about it. But yes, Mr. Rector, I would accept a motion to start moving forward with phase on this.
I move that we direct Mr. Brenner to move forward with a plan along with GHR to move forward with allocating up to $150,000 of the capital asset fund.
Seconded by Mr. Anderson. Discussion on that motion. Patsy?
Would it be possible, Mr. Rector's motion, that Mr. Brenner then would maybe lay out a timeline for all aspects of it, especially since we're going into the 2019 budget season, so we'd have some sense. That sort of folds into what Mr. Rosales was concerned about.
Do you want to?
So timeline for the whole project?
A rough timeline, so we know the monies, especially for 2019. Nothing etched in stone, but just some idea. Because my memory of that 10-year plan was within the next 5 years, as I recall. If memory is working correctly.
Well, and I'm not sure mine is either, but I think it's the next 3 to 5 years that it was included. We'll double check it. I certainly, before we get started, we'll have more discussion and report back, obviously, at the September meeting, because you don't put anything together. We don't put anything together that moves that quickly without reporting back, so.
Do you feel you can have something to present to us at the September meeting then? Okay.
With the timeline.
Best one that we can put together.
Show me the money. Oh. All right, any other discussion on this motion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Gleason.
Thanks, Jim.
And Dana. Next item is item C. Discussion of the Art Bartel mandatory sidewalk, which was part of the plat amendment. So go ahead.
Okay. For the nursing home, in order to have the property available to be sold, or at least go through a sales process, a plat revision had to be filed and accepted with the city. Once the documentation was put together, delivered to the city had a request to put in a sidewalk adjacent to Art Bartel from Learman down near the nursing home as Art Bartel moves then to the north all the way to Main Street. There is currently no sidewalk on Art Bartel. Art Bartel is not a street that the city wants to take over. They don't want the burden. And I get that. At any rate, the county has agreed to their amendment to have a sidewalk. We have, per our agreement, 2 years to accomplish this. Our clock started on July 27th when the plat revision was filed and accepted. That information is there in your packet. I did give you everything, but the first page is the most important one. That's the agreement, and it spells it out in about line 3 through about line 8. So I'd like permission from this group. I think what's necessary is to hire civil engineer, architect. I need elevations on the street. I want to be able to lay out what the street might be in 10 or 15 years with curbing, with drainage in proper areas, and where we would put a sidewalk depending upon the side of the street, based upon what services, what utilities run along either edge of it. What we don't want to do, putting in sidewalk is going to run the county a bill of about $300,000. That was an estimate by Jeff Blue, based upon depth of concrete, width of concrete, et cetera, and obviously the linear square footage. What we don't want to do as a county is to put a sidewalk quickly in and for it to be at the wrong elevation or too close, and it has to be tore out in 10 years or 12 years. That we need to protect our resources. So spending a little bit of time up front, allowing us to design basically on paper what the street might be and put a sidewalk in a proper location seems to be the prudent thing to do. We're going to run out of time to put sidewalk in this fall, nor do we have the finances this fiscal year, but we will have the finances providing the board approves the budget for 2019. But we should have those available next year by putting this down on paper and getting it started. Over the winter, we can develop the bid documentation and get it bid out first part of the year. Great time to bid out particularly sidewalk, concrete work when people are looking for work. And the work can be done anytime next spring, summer, or even fall, and be done well ahead of the anticipated 2-year window. So, any questions?
Patsy?
I'm glad to hear that you're looking 10 years ahead because, as I recall, previous conversations being that would eventually that road need to be somewhat reconstructed for the weight of a bus to go and to alert people on that road. At this point, that's not part of your consideration, is that correct? But it might still be in the conversation a decade down the line.
The consideration I'm really looking for, first of all, the weight limit that you're talking about, I believe that when County Highway built that road, they exceeded the weight necessary because of the massive truckloads that come in and out of here, salt, et cetera. So I think weight-wise, we're in great shape. Width-wise, you know, we need to take a look at the width of the street and what that means, what the addition of curbing and proper drainage would mean, and that all is going to impact where your sidewalk goes for the future. So yeah, yes, we definitely want to pay attention to what that street may become in 10, 15, or 20 years, so we don't have to tear something back out.
Any other discussion on this item? Motion's on the floor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Last one is the Brookins fire alarm, which just came up here recently, so I'll let Dana tell you about that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a oops. We do have a fire alarm panel and a system here at Brookins. There's 128 potential addressable locations on here. Unfortunately, most of them are zoned. What does that mean? Well, when we didn't have a fire drill, we had a young man from the Park District pull an alarm about 3 weeks ago, so we had a live fire drill. And as we were clearing the building and waiting for the fire department to show up, we read what was on the fire alarm panel. Fire department comes in, made the same reading, referred to our document. It's a zone. We walk into the gym. That was the zone that was identified on the panel. And we've got smoke detectors, we've got heat detectors, and we have pull stations all on the zone, and they're not individually identified. Why does that matter? Well, if you're looking for a problem, a fire, you really need to have each of your devices labeled and identified so that, you know, if one of them goes off, whether it's a live active fire or just a sensor gone bad, you need to be able to identify where it's at, what's the location. That is a major safety thing. Should we have a fire in the future, we don't take corrective action here, we're liable. We're also liable from the fire department, who their inspectors are rather agitated that we don't have an addressable system in place. Yes, it could be, you can have a building that has zones, and it could meet code. However, when you put as many people in this kind of building, this environment, in today's world, we really need to be able to identify where that sensor is that's gone bad, or what's being detected with the system. What are we looking at in terms of spending dollars? We're looking at about $20,000. And I would throw out that I've got an allotted, if you remember our capital asset fund, we only had one project on for the year. And we knew that problems like these and others would come up. So I would throw out that we'll pull that out of our capital asset fund, which is basically what it's there for. So any comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Just more for my own edification. Because we're moving from a zone to a point system, that means that they're going to have to wire each point. Go from, is the zone just picking up 8 sensors?
They're
You're gonna
already
have to run
wired.
8 back to.
They're already wired.
It's already wired, we
and
just
it's-
have the wrong system.
It requires we have an antiquated fire alarm panel. I got to think about it. It's probably early 90s.
But you're saying it's wired.
It's wired already.
That's
Yeah,
why that's why it's only 20,000. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a new panel, and then it's also a number of addressable sensors that we don't have, and we'll need to fill in, but we don't need them all. We've got a number of them, so, but that's why it's only 20,000. You are correct.
Anything else on that? Do you need a motion to go ahead with that, Dana?
I move to approve purchase of new panel.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Anderson and Mr. Rosales. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Oh, somebody said aye. Yeah. Opposed? Motion passes. There we go. Now we'll move on to updates from our facility director.
On your desk in front, I laid out four items to talk about. First of all, the first one up is A, satellite jail domestic hot water replacement project. We're virtually done. For those of you who don't know, when the satellite jail was built in '96, they did not put in a loop system for hot water, which is typically done in particularly a large building as this, and our runs were funky and ended in islands and peninsulas, if you will. So a system was put in, as well as new water heaters to be able to deliver hot water throughout the building on a much quicker basis. We had people who would, both inmates and staff, who would turn sinks on within the building, or stash stuff in the push button operation in the jail portion to leave water running. So the satellite jail actually is our biggest user of water in all of our county buildings. Do I find that, offensive? Yeah, a little bit, but it's also a living quarters. I expect it to be a little bit more, but by doing this project, we should save some utilities, both in gas and heating water, as well as just water from buying it from Illinois American Water. So project started this winter, early spring. They're basically wrapped up. We've got a few touch items to finalize. We've got some training that has to be done with our contractor, Reliable, and our maintenance staff, so that we understand the facility understand the equipment, the water heaters, the piping. Our engineer will be checking tomorrow. They've had about a month to finish this punch list, which was produced on July 11th. And so we should be in very good shape and about ready to wind this project up. The last sheet of 3 is basically where we're at with expenses to date on this project. I total not only pay applications for the contractor, Reliable, together, but also with GHR, who is the engineer on this project, so that we get a total all-cost project. Would be kind of that third category or third line. So the projected total expenses are $192,000. You can see the breakdowns from each. We're going to be under that slightly, maybe by $6,000 or $7,000. We've got one last payment to Reliable. Once the project's done, we hold money back on each pay application, just to make sure that they do all the things that are necessary and the project is completed. We have our documentation, we have our training. It's just a way that we have to help control what goes on with their contractor. So we're virtually done. I anticipate getting the last pay application a little later this month, and we're in good shape. System's up and running and has been for several months. So, any questions? Hearing none, I'll move on to B. This is an update on our downtown jail generator and the roof at the downtown jail sheriff's office. Individually, I may have spoken to several of you. I know Pius and Stan. But approximately 6 weeks ago, when we ran and we run them weekly, when we ran our weekly generator test, we noticed the generator was spewing lots of water, and it wouldn't turn on. Water coming from, well, the radiator was shot and the alternator was shot. We went to Cummings, who does service on them, and it's a Cummings generator. They gave us a price estimate of about $7,000 to rebuild the generator and to rebuild an alternator. None of these parts are available any longer. This unit was installed sometime between 79 and 80. It was actually manufactured in 1978. It's no longer serviceable in terms of finding parts for it. But Cummings found and uses a company locally in Peoria, where they're based out of, to create and rebuild generators. So we had one rebuilt, and the alternator was rebuilt. So instead of spending about $7,000, we spent about $4,500. That's the good news. But as we were hooking in a backup generator for the building that we're borrowing from EMA, we also noticed that the automatic transfer switch had gone bad. What does that do? Well, the automatic transfer switch senses that if you have a power outage, the building is without power, and it switches over to generator, which also then starts the generator. So we've had to purchase a new automatic transfer switch, so it's $2,800. And we're looking at about a $3,000 bill combined for electric service to be able to pull out the old transfer switch, put in a new one, and also for hooking up and taking down the new portable generator that was brought over, why we're kind of in the lurch here without a backup generator for our inmates and the rest of the sheriff's office. So all in all, I think we're pretty fortunate. This is coming out of our capital asset fund, but we're unfortunately spending money on a facility that we know needs a lot more, but we're trying to spend as little as possible to keep it going. The other aspect is the roof. It needs to be replaced. It's long overdue, but yet if there's any buy-in to getting out of the building at some point in the next 3, 4, 5 years, it's I would say it's not prudent to put a new roof on. It's going to cost somewhere in the magnitude of $700,000 or $800,000. We've spent about $11,000 to date on repairs, with 5 months to go, or 4.5 months to go with the remainder of the year. Keep in mind, it's been a pretty wet year. Hopefully the fall is not as bad. That's a ballasted EPDM roof. What does ballasted mean? It means that they don't glue the roof down. They hold it down with river rock. So every time you have to walk up there, bring equipment up there, you're grinding rocks into your rubber, causing holes. But then the rocks also hide the seams, and when a seam goes bad, you have a leak down below. So you literally have to scrape the rocks and sweep them and check seams. So it's labor intensive to do repairs. But we continue to do them, and we'll do so. That's coming out of our repair and maintenance budget. But that's just a fact of life, what we have to live with an old building. So, any questions? I'll move on. One that has recently come up, this is the nursing home. We are still responsible for it, listening to Van and to Deb, even with the contract, but there is a water heater. There are actually two water heaters that work in tandem to supply hot water to the large laundry facility as well as the kitchen. Nice. The water heater in question is about 6 years old. We've replaced 2 heat exchangers on it. I don't want to put a third into a unit that's 5 or 6 years old. We know it's going to fail again. The heat exchanger is probably about almost $13,000, and a new boiler is $15,500. Seems prudent to move forward. This boiler that we've looked at and spec'd out and got pricing on is also one where the fin tubing on the inside is a little larger. We seem to have a problem with our water in this building. The issue is it's been looked at by Illinois American Water. I've had it tested twice. I've had a third party come in. They can find nothing wrong with the water, except all that I know is that when we heat it up, it delivers scale to any of the heating components, and it also inhibits or makes rust happen a lot faster. And then when the rust scales off, those thin, small tubes, then are blocked up by the scale and debris, and your boilers don't work. So we think the only thing that we can do at this point, and we've looked at, we tried to, there's a new piece of equipment out that a local contractor had that he thought would do the job. It's got a push and pull pump, basically cleaning it with chemicals. We tried that. That was fortunately only a few $100s to do that. We've looked at placing a regular standard water heater in there, but we don't think it's going to hold up to the demand. The other boiler that works in tandem, they kind of alternate, is seeing some of the same problems, but it's kind of early on in the process, so it's probably got 3-4 more years of life at least. So we feel that we need to move forward and replace the boiler at the nursing home at this time. It's a cost that we'll look at getting back should the sale go through. The nursing home does not have the funds to be able to move this forward at this point. So, fact of life.
Do you need action on that?
That's not done. Yeah. Well, probably be a good idea to have an action item, because I would take it out of capital. And to do that, yeah, it's $15,500. We did get pricing from 2 other vendors that was significantly higher.
I want to point out the Genesis update, so
both in the 19,000 category, so.
The agenda only says update, so it's not an action item.
Yeah, oh, yeah. The action we can take next month is to approve it as a capital expense. It's gonna go through between now and then.
Just a quick question. Since we're gonna push this to next month, is there any way, some of these exclusions can be, quantitatively assessed or, estimated?
Which ones you talking about?
Overtime, other scopes, electrical, fire protection, painting,
No,
roof work included, like,
That's pretty standard. There is a different flue that has to be put in, the flue, that's where the gas escapes after there's fire in the boiler, so it goes up. Right now, it's in a PVC pipe that's 6 inches wide, and it's got to be a metal flue double-walled, so this is a hotter burning boiler. It's a much more efficient boiler than the one that was in there or the other one that is currently in operation as well. But they've allotted for that and figured that within their pricing according to the HVAC scope that's listed there. So these are.
Typical, but we're not gonna need it because we
Yeah,
already have this in
correct.
place. So there's
Correct.
no need to be pads added, holes cut in the walls and so forth.
Yeah. They're-
Basically taking the old one out, putting the new one in.
They're hedging their bet, basically, and that's pretty standard boilerplate, so I think this is with all other stuff, like we would do with some boilerplate language on a contract. Oh, boy, it's been a great month.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay, satellite jail. In June, we had a compressor go down, Unit 2, Circuit B. And unfortunately, last week, Unit 4, Circuit A went down. Now, we've already replaced the compressor in Unit 2. As you can see from the information, reliable, we got 3 prices from everyone. We got 3 prices from the local contractors. Reliable was the lowest for the first unit. They also included some additional piping. That is done and then been taken care of. The second one, we just finalized pricing last week. So for another $8,324, we'll be replacing the other compressor. What's the compressor do? These are on the RX units on the ceiling, on the roof. There's 4 of them up there. There are 2 compressors in each unit. What does the compressor do? Well, the compressor forces the cold water down to the air handlers from the roof. Part of the problem that we have with the design of this building is that we're pushing, with these small little units and these small pumps, we're pushing cold water up and down several times to get to these air handlers, and it's just too far of a distance. Can we make a change? Not until we do a larger project there and do something that probably should have been done initially, and that's go with a larger chiller that has bigger compressors, bigger pumps, can handle longer distances, and larger pipes. So this is putting back basically what was currently there. The compressors are integral parts in bringing air conditioning into the building. We've got to keep folks in there in reasonable temperatures. So we're moving forward as quickly as we can to get this replaced. Right now, with the temperatures we've had, we're okay, but should we get back up into the 90s without getting it taken care of fairly quickly, there'll be a couple areas that will notice an increase in temperature inside.
Any questions on that item? Thank you, Dana.
Patsy's got a question.
Oh, go ahead, Patsy, I'm sorry.
Well, it isn't so much a question as maybe a request, you've had a lot of expenses, and would it be useful for us to see how these against the different accounts that you're using to pay for them, and how we have another, 5 months in the year to see how things are laying out and what you're having to work with or against, depending on how you look at the situation.
I'll bring that, we can have that discussion and sharing at the next meeting, so I'll bring an updated budget of where our repair and maintenance items are at. Several are winding down, and we're having to take money out of others to cover expenses, and with months to go, which is typical. Probably would be easier to have one repair and maintenance, and then you just, move it around a little bit versus how we're configured budgetarily. The second item I'll bring is an update on where we're at with the capital asset fund for the year and expenses to date and where we think we'll be.
Based on what he just said, if you have a suggestion on how you would rather see things set up in the budget, we're going into the next budget year, you might make a recommendation if it makes it easier for you.
I've had several conversations with Tammy and Deb, and I honestly don't think that, as long as we're on the AS 400, we're really limited to what we can do, and until there's a change in that, then hopefully we can take a look at maybe revising things.
Anything else? I have no chair's report, but since Tracy's new here, you see there's been a lot of things neglected for a lot of years. And I have to commend Dana for band-aiding everything. Hopefully this will get turned around where we actually take care of facilities. Thank you, Dana. Next meeting will be Tuesday, September 4th. Anybody have any other business at this time? For consent agenda, I have 7A, C, and D.
Some of those items were internal, I think. Like item A was just direction towards Mr. Brenner, I think, so
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure about the other two. I don't recall what the motions were.
We took motions on all of them.
But were they just direction towards Dana or?
They're really towards me.
Okay,
All right,
so we don't have any for consent agenda.
right. One other item, other business, as you all know, I'm going to Washington DC with a bunch of other county board leaders from Illinois, and I really can't think of anything that facilities would be lobbying for in facilities, I guess, other than free money to fix our buildings, but are there any ideas out there? I can't really think of anything.
Are you talking about taking suggestions?
Yes.
With you?
Concerning facilities.
Bring back cash.
I'll do that.
Oh, so you're only focusing on facilities?
Correct.
Nothing else for the county right now?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
All right, I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. So when are you leaving, Pius?
September 11th, come back to 14th.
Somebody comes up with something, let Dana know or whatever.
Right,
Well, let you know by then. Okay. Thank you, sir.
right.
No other business? Nothing else? I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.